From 18 to 33, I was a hardcore addict. I got caught up in a drug bust, and now that I wasn't a kid anymore, I got charged. I got charged with felony possession.
Welcome to this week's edition of Recovery Happens. My name is Patrick Patterson, Center Manager for BW Rock. Drugs and alcohol have destroyed so many lives across the nation today. We're going to be sitting down with Tony as he talks about how recovery has helped restore his life.
Well, Patrick, my childhood was a little bit out of the norm. My mom and dad got divorced when I was real young, about 7, 8 years old. She moved in with an African-American man in the west side of Detroit, and life was a little bit different for me than other kids in the fact that, I was the only Caucasian kid in my neighborhood. We were actually bused to a Caucasian school because all my friends were African American, and so I got teased a lot. I got jumped on, so I learned at an early age. I either had to fight or buddy up, and not to mention just that fact of growing up in that type of environment. Back in the 70s, it wasn't readily accepted of any interracial relationships, and so there was still that stigma and discrimination. But to give you a kind of good idea as far as what home life was like for me, I give you a kind of an example. One of the first experiences as a kid, I think I was about 9 at the time, coming home from school. I was going around the corner to my house, and I noticed in my backyard there was all these big guys, and they were beating up on my mom's boyfriend, and his name was Lewis. And so I turned the corner, and I saw my house, and I saw these guys. My front door was busted wide open. There were people coming and going. Didn't know what the heck was going on. Walked up, and there was this big guy in a vest and a lady, and they were asking me where my mommy was at. And I didn't know what was going on. I just kind of like a deer in headlights. And my mom came home later that evening, picked me up, and we went into our house, and everything was just ripped to shreds. My room, everything. And so any sense of safety, that I had kind of started drifting away at that point. My mom kind of sat me down and talked a little bit about, our life. And the kinds of things that happened in our home couldn't necessarily be shared with other people, not other family members. So I learned at a very early age there was 3 things that I lived by: don't trust, don't tell, and don't feel. In addition to drug raids, there were drive-by shootings in my home. There were kidnappings. There was lots of violence, and shootouts. And so those were kind of common experiences growing up. And, and you just learn to accept this is what life is like. The drugs started at an early age for me. I don't know, 15, 16, I started smoking pot. I saw people overdose in my house. My stepfather, he's not really my stepfather, but Lewis sold heroin and crack cocaine. He started off with heroin and crack cocaine in the 80s, and he got into that. And so he did both, and so people would come by and buy, and they would shoot up in the home, and there were quite a few times people overdosed, and I witnessed that. I was actually an active participant when I was 10 years old, helping my mom give CPR to one of the guys that fell out in the bathroom. And the one thing that I felt when I started smoking pot and drinking was the fear subsided for me. From that point, I started doing acid, hallucinogens, and different things. And the turning point for me it was when I was 18. I graduated high school. I was down in the basement. I had moved down in the basement then because of the shootings. I didn't feel safe upstairs. So I heard all this yelling and screaming, and Lewis screaming my mom's name. So I didn't think anything about it. There's like lots of screaming and yelling and fighting in my house growing up. But I got up and I went upstairs to see what the heck was going on. And my mom was laying in the bed, and she was motionless, and she was barely breathing. At that point, Lewis didn't want to call the EMS because of, the house and different things that were going on there. So I helped put my mom in a car. We drove her to the hospital where she was declared dead on arrival. And that's when life changed for me dramatically. It seemed like everything that I experienced in my lifetime, that all those things that I shoved down and that I locked away, I was just so overwhelmed and that I really didn't know how to deal with it. The most important person in my life was gone, and I didn't know what to do. And it was at that point that, I decided to take care of the arrangements for my mom's burial myself. Lewis asked me what I wanted to do. I was too scared to tell my grandparents or any family members, so I had my mom cremated, and I tried to put it behind me, lock it behind a door, and move on with life. And then, in doing that, I just escalated to cocaine, to heroin, alcohol, and I did all three on a regular basis. From 18 to 33, I was a hardcore addict. I got caught up in a drug bust, and now that I wasn't a kid anymore, I got charged. I got charged with felony possession. My criminal record started. I went to county jails. The judge had some leniency based upon some of the things that I went through. That, he sent me to rehab, sent me to counselors and groups, and as far as I was concerned, man, I didn't have nothing to share with these people. What ended it for me was I was looking at going to a state facility, and I didn't like being locked up, and so that was my motivation. That and the fact that I tried to kill myself and hang myself and failed in that attempt, I decided that something had to give. And so having felony warrants for my arrest again, and just totally overwhelmed, I checked myself in Oakland County Community Mental Health. Went through an assessment. They decided that I definitely needed to go to rehab. I had an in-house counselor there, and he asked me what was I going to do after I got out. I told him if I went back to the city, I know how it's going to turn out. So he said, well, if you're interested, he says I can look into some other programs maybe that would be helpful for you. So they found a residential placement facility that focused on mental and substance use recovery. Okay, since recovery happened to me, life has changed dramatically. Just kind of go into details about what recovery is to me. I live recovery on four aspects. I'm sitting on this chair. This chair has four legs, and those four legs, when I sit on it, it's pretty solid. And those four legs to me are emotional health, mental health, physical health, and spiritual health. And focusing on those things, emotional health with support groups, therapy, and those kind of things. Physical health, taking care of my health. I had Hep C, so I had to get some liver treatments due to my intravenous drug use. And then on the spiritual is the one kind of really turned things around for me. I started with AA. I'm not sure if you're familiar with 12 steps of AA, but they focus on a higher power, and that I can't and he can. And so when I started opening up to that concept, because God, as far as I was concerned, had left me a long time ago. And so I didn't think there was, anything that he could do to help me. But I found that, over time, he did for me what I couldn't do for myself. And that was to give me a sense of peace. And I didn't have that for a long time. I've been active in recovery since August 1st, 1999. So I'm going on 20 years, I think. And so, which is pretty remarkable. Sometimes when I even think about the past, it's kind of surreal. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I had nightmares and terrors, and and I had a hard time coping with feelings. And that was the one thing that was really the change for me. Sobriety was one thing, and in being in recovery, it was helpful. But it wasn't until I combined my substance use recovery to my mental health recovery that I really started to find some stability. Because I found a lot of the same stuff that I used drugs and alcohol to kind of medicate myself were still there. I just didn't have the drugs and alcohol to medicate them. So it just, learning how to cope with things and learning how to open up with a therapist, open up to medications, and those have been, the turning point for me too. My family means everything to me. My wife, I met her in my first year of recovery. We've been married now 19 years. We were not supposed to have any children because of a medical condition that she had, and I'm big believer in prayer, and so and I kind of wanted to have children, to have somebody, to share, my legacy, for lack of a better term, and to give him a better life than I had or her, and God heard us, and He gave me a son, and he's my biggest accomplishment as far as I'm concerned. He's the joy of my life. He's 10 years old, and I'm giving him the life that I never had, and so that really means a lot to me.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Recovery Happens. If you'd like to donate to the cause of recovery, please visit our website. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Country Style Marketplace.